there's two fundamental principles behind what I do. The first is that I'm very passionate about customers. And the other thing is essential is a attitude that you're never, ever good enough, that you can always improve.
It's time to down tools for a bit. Welcome to the Tool Shed, the influential podcast for anyone and everyone involved in the building industry. Here's your host, Mick Hawes.
Hey there, before we kick off, I want to share a really important thought. 71% of you who watch this channel frequently don't subscribe. So if you've enjoyed any video you've ever watched, can you do me a favor and hit the subscribe button? It helps the channel more than you think, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests get. So let's go. Hey folks, welcome to the Tool Shed podcast. I'm super excited for this episode. I'm sure in your travels that you have seen one of those green trailers with the yellow writing on them in somebody's yard. Jim's Mowing, Jim's Cleaning, all of those different businesses. And I'm really excited today to be speaking to the man behind the brand, Jim Penman. Absolute pleasure to meet you. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I came across you in another podcast. I think it might have been Ashley Beltke's podcast a little while ago, talking about leadership. And I thought what you were saying was absolutely fascinating, and immediately spoke to our team and said, I've got to have a conversation with Jim because it was fascinating. So, love to sort of just get the backstory. One of the things that as a business coach I've always said sort of for the last 30 years that the standard garden variety business, small business, as far as longevity is concerned, has never ever been as successful as a franchise style business because of the systems and the processes. So how did you get involved and sort of where did you get the idea that you wanted to start up a franchise however many years ago?
Well, originally it was my student job. I've been doing gardening since, since I was 8 years old. I did it most of my childhood. And then in 1970, I took a gap year. And as part of that, I put some notice in the window of a local hardware store. And I got some gardening jobs, and a few years later I bought a mowing. And then in 1982, I found myself after 10 years at university with actually having failed originally a PhD in history and deeply in debt. So I didn't know what else to do. So I actually started mowing lawns full time. And 7 years later, I franchised it. Wow.
So again, having been sort of in the business coaching space for a number of decades, there are very few people that I've come across that just, I call them freaks of nature, that just seem to naturally understand about the importance of understanding and communicating and leadership as far as business success is concerned. I having listened to you, I think that you are one of those people. I know that there's a massive library behind you, and before we hit the record button, you said it's just a fraction of the books that you've got. So you're an avid student and continue to learn. But you know, what are the sort of fundamental philosophies that you think that you've embraced that's made your business journey so successful? And I know it's wrapped around people and leadership.
There's two fundamental principles behind what I do. The first is that I'm very passionate about customers. That's an emotional drive. I can never look after people well enough, and that includes my clients, but also more particularly in recent years, my franchisees. And the other thing is essential is a attitude that you're never, ever good enough, that you can always improve. So every day, and this is going on for decades and decades, I ask myself the question, how can I get better? And that's not just weekdays, but weekends, public holidays, Christmas Day, every day. I'm asking myself that question, how can I improve? It's never good enough.
Yeah. I'd love to hear your thoughts on on balance, because I cut my teeth running time management seminars 30 something years ago, 35 years ago or something, and we used to talk about work-life balance then, but that was kind of before mobile phones and social media and all of that sort of stuff, and it was kind of possible. I'm not sure that balance is so easy to achieve in this day and age, and I suspect that you're forever thinking about what can I do better, how can I be better, and I suspect that it doesn't feel like work to you. It's just like you're obviously very, very passionate about it. What are your thoughts on sort of work-life stuff?
I love what I do.
Yeah.
In a sense, if you gave me like $20 billion and said, okay, you're set for life, what would you do? Well, I'd pretty much do the same thing I'm doing now, maybe on a bit slightly larger scale. So I'm not exactly after money. And I can't imagine retiring. I'm 73 years old. I'll probably live for another 20 years. And I can't imagine stopping unless I'm so sick that I'm just in my hospital bed dying or something. So I just love what I do. It's very fun. It's very meaningful. I have a sense of purpose. I really, helping my franchisees to succeed is very big for me. I get a lot of satisfaction. I find it painful when they don't. And I just enjoy the thrill, the game. It's like business is like a massive multiplayer computer game, but you get paid for. I mean, what? How could you have a better life than that?
I mean, you're obviously passionate. You've said you've got a sense of purpose. What are some of the things that you do, or what are some of the things that you've got in place in the Jim's group to either find franchisees that have that passion, or is it possible to teach that, or like how do you transfer your passion into the people in your team?
Well, I talk a lot. Every training, I do the initial hour and a half talk, which is what we call the ethos, about service to clients, service to franchisees.
Yep.
And I finish the talk. I do the last talk, which is about income, a bit over an hour. And I try to talk to every franchisee prospect during training. And I give my phone number and my email address to every franchisee in training. And anybody who wants it can get it. They can always contact me anytime. So I would have contact with multiple franchisees a day. So I spend a lot of time communicating with franchisees. I do with things like complaints, problems with, poor service to franchisees, anything at all. They've got problems, they come to me. So I'm talking to people a lot. I'm actually not very good at doing most things. I'm not particularly good on accounting or administration or legalities and stuff, but I have this connection. And people find it very odd. You've got 5,500 franchisees. How do you keep in touch with them? Well, it's almost my most important job because I find out what's going on and I see problems and I say, okay, how can we fix that? Why are you not succeeding? People ask me my goals sometimes, and they say, how many franchises you want to have? And I've never had numerical or financial goals. But my one goal I'd like to achieve is that every single one of my franchisees is completely happy, which is obviously completely impossible. It will never happen, but I'll never stop working towards it.
Yeah. It's a high bar, and it just sort of keeps you moving forward. And I think that, like you talked about a sense of purpose, but I think that giving people the systems and the processes to be able to run their own businesses and have some degree of freedom more than being an employee. Some people aren't very good employees, so they're unemployable and they run their own business. But I mean, teaching people how to do that effectively must be very, very rewarding, because it's like the statistics of small business failure are terrible. Like they're distressing. But as I said in the intro, if you've got systems and processes, but obviously the mindset side of things is super important. That it must be very fulfilling to be able to teach and have affected so many thousands of people and their families, being able to be the masters of their own destiny.
What we measure is attrition rate. That's the best way. So, for example, if you go into an independent business like a trade business like cleaning, gardening, your chance of being in business at the end of 12 months is between about 5 and 10%. You can look this up. It's on the line. Traditionally speaking, we were about 17%. That we were losing 17% in the first year, and that happened for many years, and that was interstate everywhere, year by year. And then we introduced our current training program, and as soon as we did that in the first year, the attrition rate dropped to 10.5%. So more than a third of those who were leaving in the first year were staying. Now, since then, it's come up to about 12%, which is higher than I like, but that's how you measure it. And things like the training course, every single session of the course is designed to say, how can we stop you failing? So when I talk about customer service, which I'm obviously very passionate about, one of the things I explain to them is not only is great customer service, as our complaints rate has gone down, our leads have given dramatically. We didn't used to have unserviced leads in the past. We now have hundreds of thousands a year without spending more advertising. So, but the other thing is, what we teach franchisees is that if you give good customer service, you're far more likely to purport good income, and you're also far more likely to stay long term. And I give them the figures on this. So I really, really hit that process hard. And then every session is the same thing. What can we teach you that will make you more likely that you will succeed?
One of the questions I was thinking about before we started is that I know that in my journey I've thought certain things or believe certain things, and over the journey I've learned something else, and I've flipped that belief. Like maybe that was wrong. Maybe this is the best way to do it, or a better way of doing it. Can you think of anything that you can share that you have shifted in your thinking over the journey, where you've sort of thought one way and now you think something completely different? I'd be fascinated to know that.
I change all the time. People think of me as some sort of business guru. I've made more stupid mistake in my business career than most people have in 4 lifetimes. There's one classic mistake that I've often made is to jump into things I don't understand. Apart from my central mowing and service franchise business, I've tried trade exchanges more than once. I tried Amway in the early days. I've had different kinds of shops. I've had tourist resort. I mean, you name it. I've done so many dumb things, and the only thing they had in common is they all lost money. Set up a psychology institute. The big lesson I've learned is, Jim, stick to what you know, which isn't very much. Just stick to those franchise areas which you understand, and don't try and get involved in other things, because they look easy, but they're not. Making fiberglass trailers in a factory, that was terrible. Oh, my goodness.
But you were having a go, and I guess the lost money is the fee for education. You've got to put that towards your education.
I don't understand. There's so many potential in what we do. There are so many things we can do better than we do now, and there's so many areas we can go into. We just stick to your knitting. If you know something, if you understand it. The other things look really attractive and interesting, but in reality, if you don't know what you're doing, they're a lot more complicated than you think.
So, from a mindset point of view, what do you think is important for a franchise or any sort of small business owner? What do you think is sort of one of the most important mindsets to develop, and what are the errors in some people's mindsets that you've seen that kind of hold them back or cause failure?
Well, it's exactly the same things I talked about myself. There's two things that indicate a good franchisee. First of all, an attitude towards customer service that is not just a matter of doing things to make money, but giving great customer service because you care about the person you're dealing with. You don't want to let them down. That emotional attitude, I find that very indicative. And the other thing is this business of constant improvement. See, we divide franchisees into 3 groups. You got your gold, you got your bronze, you got your lead. Gold franchisee is somebody who always comes up with ideas. They're always thinking, how can I improve? They're innovative, they're sharing ideas, they're learning. They're the people that probably succeed even without us, but they'll do better with us, but they tend to do well. Then you've got the majority, which we call bronze, people who would most likely fail if they went by themselves, but they're prepared to listen and be coached. And we have a system where we ring franchises at least monthly, ideally weekly, and talk to them, and then run meetings and all this sort of training and everything else. And you're helping them to succeed. And then you got a group we call leads, which are people who just don't listen. No matter what you say, if they're getting a whole lot of complaints, they don't blame themselves. They say, "Oh no, you're giving me lousy leads, and the clients are all terrible clients, and your system sucks," and just go on and on. Everything's wrong except me. I'm perfect. Everything else is wrong, and it's pretty bizarre. You can have a franchisee who's failing, really failing, who's been in business 3 months and they're failing. Get to come to me for advice what to do. I look at the notes. I see the franchisor's been given a very good advice. So I repeat the advice. I say, you should do this and this and this. There's certain kinds of self-marketing, this and this and this. And the guy says, no, you're wrong, Jim. You're wrong. What you should do, I have to do is this. And I said, but you're doing that and it's failing. He said, but no, your system is bad. Your system is wrong. You should do this. You should get me more leads. I don't have to do this. You're the one who's got to change. And they fail. So here's a guy who's in business 3 months, who's failing, who's telling his franchisor who's been doing the same business for 20 years, you're wrong. He's telling me I'm wrong, but he's right, and he won't change.
You get that on the big jobs. That's one of the most frustrating things, isn't it? That I think the old grandmother saying, when you've got one finger pointing out there, you've got three others pointing back at you, and taking personal responsibility is one of my bugbears. It's like it's you are who you are and where you are because of the choices you've made and what goes into your mind.
Sometimes franchisees have a genuine point, though. I'm going to say that. Like I get a message about somebody. It's a common thing. I write my franchisees a letter after 1 month, an email letter, asking how they're going and asking about a thing we call pay for work guarantee. And they write back, and most people are pretty happy, but sometimes they're not. And then when they do that, I will actually go through a whole stack of things they need to do, how to use pay for work guarantee system, look at these videos. Here's franchisees from other divisions in their region that they can do freebies for. Here's some extra services they might be interested in doing from other divisions that are unserviced. But I might also copy the franchisor and give them a boot up the pants. And I said, you've given me 23 leads in the last month, not enough. Get some more advertising out. So there's a combination of telling the franchisee to do something, but sometimes the franchisor needs to get off their backside too. Yeah.
I know one of the things that's really important to me with Black Belt and our builders coaching members is the membership, is the community. What's your thoughts about being in a community of people that are basically in the same industry, in the same business, sharing ideas, helping each other out? What's that look like in Jim's group?
It's fundamental and far more important than I could have imagined when I started this thing. One of the way we discovered this was when we began, meetings were not part of the system. What used to happen was that the franchisees who were near me in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne used to come in and meet, originally in my lounge room, and then we put an extra circle of chairs and it grew quite fast, and we moved out to a sort of a school hall. But what I noticed was that even this was very informal. The franchisees around me were doing quite well, but the further away they went, the less well they did. And our first interstate franchisees, most of them actually failed. And I said, what's the difference? Why is people in my area doing so well and others are doing so badly and they're dropping out? I was talking to them. I was advertising for them. I was answering their queries and stuff. And then I realized meetings. So we put local franchise, all of them, local meetings, and other areas started to come up. So we actually figured out the optimum meetings about every 6 weeks, which is, I know it sounds strange. You think one monthly or quarterly, but 6 weeks works. So 8 a year. That's got to run. And then we later discovered two things like what we call proactive calls, which we didn't ask from the beginning because we tried to work out why some regions were going better than others. So this combination of meetings, proactive calls, reacting to franchisees' call, responding promptly, that's the fundamental support that seems to work. Other things we did like annual business reviews had no effect at all. So you got to work out what works. Meeting is incredibly important. Meetings are important for two separate reasons. One is it's an opportunity to learn and to grow and to pick up new ideas and make a network with other people so you can learn from them, not just from the talks, but from other experienced people. And the other thing is there's a sense of community, as you were saying. And that's incredibly important because people often fail because they give up, they get discouraged. So coming to a meeting is a time when you get to know other people and learn from them and form friendships and they run each other at the tip, or they ring each other after hours and become friends and that sort of thing. That kind of thing is really, really important.
But how good is that? Like that's one of my greatest pleasures is seeing the friendships and the connections that are created in that community. And they jump on planes and go and visit each other, and when there's an issue, they'll reach out to each other and support each other, which is really interesting because I didn't think that would happen in the building industry. Do you find that any of your community tend to hold their cards close to their chest and don't share? Like, I thought that's what would happen, but it's the exact opposite has happened.
No, they don't. They very readily share with each other. I think one of the things that's most encouraging is that the degree of care. I see stories all the time. Somebody goes to a meeting and there's guys there who are experienced. They'll take them under their wing. They'll help them and they'll advise them and they'll spend time with them. Sometimes spend half an hour chatting and even just giving the help. I see it all the time. We see some wonderful stories. I mean, COVID for us was terrible when we couldn't work for 8 weeks. It was really traumatic and upsetting, and it was infuriating at the same time. But the thing that was so positive was the way people looked after each other.
Yeah.
My franchisors were not getting paid because we couldn't charge fees, but they were actually working harder during that time with no pay than they ever did before or since, because just talking to the guys, keeping in touch, and they would help each other. We had one young girl who was a student, and she was a dog wash. She wasn't allowed to wash dogs, and she had no government money, so she's being faced with eviction. She can't pay her grocery bills. The other franchisees helped her. They actually gave her things like meal vouchers. We said, if you get evicted, you can come and stay at our conference center, which was closed. She got through it. Last time I heard, she was making $5,000 a week. She was doing well, but just people who, even though they were out of work themselves, they just helped others. Was wonderful to see. It was very moving.
Yeah, I think things like the pandemic, they bring the best and the worst out in people, but it's wonderful to see the best. I know that I've seen that. We've been trapped down the Tasman Peninsula one time when there was a bushfire, and the community comes together and it just brings the best out of the people. And then some people it brings the worst out of them. But I think the main, they help each other.
I find it's great, actually. I was driving up to my place in the country the other day, and there was a tree that fell across the road. And there's a whole bunch of us just got out and started sawing at things and pulling it off. Think about well in an emergency. I find governments can be particularly abysmal, particularly our state Labor government here in Victoria. But people have been wonderful, actually. A lot of community support. A lot of people just hang together and help each other. We do our best. It's like the Blitz in the Second World War in London. They said it really brought out a sense of community.
Yeah.
The same thing here on a lesser level.
Yeah. A little moment ago, you were talking about the rates of churn or that sort of stuff, people staying with you or not, and you used. You also talked about building fiberglass trailers and all of the quote unquote failure that you've had, and you used the word failure, and I thought, as you said it, I'm hearing you use the word, but I don't believe that you associate that word with the same meaning as most other people associate that word. It doesn't seem to affect you negatively like it does. It doesn't seem like you're scared of it either. What's your philosophy around the F word?
Well, it's good. Failing is good because it teaches you what not to do in the future. See, if you're not failing, you're not trying anything new, are you? If you keep on doing the same thing in the same way, well, I suppose the world changes, you can fail anyway. But generally speaking, that's pretty safe. But when you try doing new things all the time, I'm wildly experimental.
Yeah.
We're changing things all the time. The fundamental values of gyms, the service, the franchisees, to clients, this kind of thing never changes, but everything else changes. So we're always changing contracts, changing ideas, changing support, changing IT, just constant, massive innovation all the time. Failure is part of it. You do something that we've got this wonderful system we're developing called Jimbo. It's just being released now to our franchisees. That's like the third in a series of systems, and the other two just wrong platform, wrong system. Failed. But How do you succeed by failing and learning your lessons?
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed that on your website you had a thing called Chat with AI Jim. That's obviously something that's fairly new. Tell me about that.
Well, I've got more than 1 million words of podcasts and talks like this one.
Yeah.
They've all been put in, so you can go to AI Jim and ask questions, and it's actually pretty good. Um, I try and trip it up at times, but no, it knows things pretty well. If a question gets asked, it gives a wrong response, or it doesn't know how to answer, then I'll just do a recording and we'll update it.
Mm.
You can ask it all kinds of things. Why did the Roman Empire collapse? Or how do you succeed in business? All kinds of things. What is epigenetics?
Yeah.
Yes. Ask me anything, and it's mostly pretty good.
Yeah, that's amazing. So we talked about your library. You said it's just a fraction of the books that you've got and read, and you mentioned that you've sort of 2 to 3 books a week. So you're a voracious consumer of information. Let me know if you can't answer this question, but I want you to have a real red hot go at it. Best book that you've ever read?
That's so hard.
I didn't want to ask you an easy question.
You asked me the most influential book it had to be the Bible, because that's the basis of the way that I think about life and business and everything. That's your core thing. But there's so many wonderful books. I've got a thing called Best Books. If you go on jimpenman.com.au, you'll see a list of my absolute favourite books. There must be about 80 of them there now. There's so many. You look at things like Guns, Germs and Steel, which is about social evolution and so forth. I love that book about, there's books about human evolution, which I really enjoy. In terms of business books, there are, I think, books like Tiny Habits and Atomic Habits are wonderful ways of developing good habits, because that's the key to anything. It's doing things that you don't necessarily feel like doing, but habits of exercise and work and practice and so forth. There's books on diet there, how not to diet, how not to die. I like that kind of book.
That's a handy one.
Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, which is about mobile phones.
Yes.
The trouble is there's so many brilliant books, and there's more all the time. There's a book called Dopamine Nation, which has been very influential. I read that about a couple of years back, and it allowed me to redesign my whole theory and my whole research project just from one book. But and understanding something I didn't understand before, how dopamine works, how our brains react to it. So, my goodness, I could just go on for hours about books. There are so many. I'm just rereading a book now about the war of in China, Japan and China in the 1930s, 1940s, and how that works. And I'm also listening to another book about civilizations. I'm listening to one about the Abbasid Caliphate. So a lot of business books. I love reading people like recently reading about Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger.
Yeah.
I mean, amazing people. I really admire them so much. But I also read about the bad ones, like about Enron and about Jack Welch, who was lauded at the time, but was a shockingly bad leader in the long term, almost destroyed GE in his stupid, short-sighted policies.
Yeah.
It's just, I could just go on for hours about books. There are so many great books.
Well, I think it was.
I like books about happiness.
Go ahead.
No, not just about business. I like books about, but happiness. How you're happy. People have very deluded ideas about things like that. They think that more material stuff you can buy, the happier you'll be, and it's just not true. And then,
that's a fascinating topic. I know that I've more recently started, consuming Dr. Arthur Brooks information. Harvard Business School, but he specialises in happiness and talks about the difference between, like, there are things that make us happy, but there are also things that reduce our unhappiness. And he talks about how they're two separate experiences operated by two separate parts of the brain. So it's not like a seesaw. If you do things that make you happy, it means you'll be less unhappy. That doesn't work that way. Or if you reduce your unhappiness, you'll be more happy. You've got to do both. You've got to do the things that increase your happiness and decrease your unhappiness. And it's just a fascinating fascinating concept, and we turned it into like a 2-day workshop for our members a couple of months ago, and it really, really did make a difference. You know, things like just going for a walk first thing of a morning, you know, preferably before the sun comes up, and being outside in nature and having that experience of awe sort of changes the perspective that you and your problems aren't really all of that significant in the scheme of things when you see that, you know, these incredible natural occurrences like a sunrise, like it happens every day, but we don't appreciate it. We walk straight past it, but it's just fascinating stuff.
Well, the interesting thing is people think about the way to be happy is to have a prestigious white-collar job and make a whole lot of money and buy a whole lot of expensive stuff. But in fact, the things that make you happy in a job tend to be things like having flexibility in your hours, having physical work, because exercise is the biggest mood booster there is, being outside a lot, and in contact with nature. Well, if you put those together, probably about the most happy job you could possibly have is being a gardener. Seriously,
that was very well done.
I used to love doing it.
Yeah.
And you know what? Do you know what I was doing at the weekend? I mean, for fun.
Yeah.
I was gardening.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
I've got a small farm, and I'm planting fruit trees and nut trees, and I'm looking after my chickens and growing potatoes and stuff. I just love that. It's just enjoyable.
Yeah. I mean, the passion obviously shows. I'd like to change gears now because, you know, doing a whole bunch of reading about you and your interests and so forth prior to this conversation, I was surprised to find out that you've got a PhD in epigenetics from La Trobe University.
Well, the PhD is actually in history. I don't think,
Okay.
But when I did it, epigenetics wasn't even known. But I was looking at patterns of historical change and later come to understand that these are epigenetic in origin.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's like I just started to dive into it, and it just sort of got more fascinating and more interesting, and I thought this is going to be a fantastic opportunity to learn more about it and understand about it. So what sort of piqued your interest? Why did you decide to do a PhD in history in the first place, which sort of ended up focusing you on epigenetics?
Well, ever since I was 14, I've been fascinated by the rise and fall of civilizations. When I was a teenager, I was an avid reader. We didn't have TV in those days or anything. So I read all the time, and I just read a lot of books about history. And why did it happen? Why did the Roman Empire collapse? Why did civilizations flourish and then disappear? So I went to university basically to try and discover that. Started off looking at sociology and decided that was the biggest load of garbage. And then I really terrible, absolutely terrible.
Tell me just before you go on, why did you say that? Why is it a big load of garbage?
Because it's not empirical. It doesn't actually seem to relate to society. You can't make testable hypotheses. My view of history is it should be treated like a science. You make a hypothesis and you test it. You actually try and work out why things happen in a way that's reproducible. So, for example, let's look at something like the Second World War. Okay? Now, people can have all kinds of reasons to why the Second World War took place, but I've got a theory about why that happened. And that's because of a pattern that you see again and again in history, that when you have a very major, violent war, and then there's a period of peace afterwards, the kids that grow up, who are born around the end of the war, when they become military age, you get this extreme outbreak of violence. Now, you can see it in Chinese history again and again with the Qin dynasty and then the Han. It happens with the Ming. It happened with the Sui and the Tang. It happened with the Qing. It happened with the Ming. It's a common historical pattern. And what I've presumed is that what happens is that the stress of the war transmitted by the mother to the infant makes that child much more aggressive when they get to military age, and therefore you tend to get rebellions and wars taking place. Now, the interesting thing about that is that's a hypothesis which is completely different from anything you'll see in any history book, but it actually says one thing too. You should look for a certain kind of epigenetic pattern in people who are born at that age. So somebody who was born in China at the end of the Civil War, say 48, 49, should have a certain epigenetic pattern, which is also characteristic of rats that have the same kind of experiences. In other words, very early stress. So it's kind of like it's a theory of history, which is also testable. That's what I do, looking at patterns, looking at demographics, what happens as a correlation between this. See, one interesting thing is I look at the effect of the Great Depression. Now, what's very interesting is that people ask, why did the baby boom happen? Why was there this big surge of births after the Second World War? So between 1945 and 1965. Yeah. And they'll say, oh, well, that's because of the effect of the war. Well, that's completely empirical, because after the First World War, which was just as brutal, the birth rate collapsed. But if you look at it, you see that the people who were the baby boom parents actually were the ones who passed their late childhood, not early childhood, but late childhood in the Great Depression. And when they grew up, they had a very different attitude to life. They were much more community-minded, family-minded, church-going, marriage-minded, the whole lot of characteristics. And this, again, if you were to measure people in the right epigenetics, you should be able to see that same pattern in the population.
Mm. You mentioned dopamine a little while ago as well, and yes, there's a whole lot of conversations around that, and like we're even in our group talking about and encouraging our members to do a dopamine detox, where you're staying away from dopamine, yes, for a significant period of time, and resetting your brain so the things that are actually good for you give you the dopamine spike, rather than things that make you stupid and not focus and things like that. What have you learnt through your research about dopamine? You seem very passionate about something you've consumed of recent times.
Well, it's the key to everything. Because what happens is there's different effects at different ages, but the one we're talking about, which is to do with loving marriage, children, family, community, those kind of things too, particularly related to what happens in your late childhood. Now, what actually happens then, our brains are a lot more plastic. Brains are a lot more plastic when we're younger. The younger you are, the more plastic they are, the bigger the effect is. What happens is the people who reached late childhood in that particular period, the Great Depression was like a very, very bad on dopamine. It was a lot of people were hungry. It was very economically sad. It was really difficult, tough times. That affected them. And what it actually did is it made their brains far more sensitive to dopamine. So that whereas, today, a young person to be happy needs to have, they had to have cocaine or alcohol or promiscuous social relations or sex or gambling or wild parties and stuff, because they need a lot of dopamine to make them feel comfortable. If you had your late childhood in that period of time, you don't need that. You're very comfortable with work and with family and with children, the familiar. So it's kind of your brain's been wired differently, and it's a relatively permanent effect. So the dopamine detox system is completely correct. That's exactly what you should do. You should avoid the things that give you this burst of dopamine, which is drugs, alcohol, even coffee, lots of things of that nature, video games, social media with all the likes and so forth, all these things, gambling, speculating, all these things push up, give you a dopamine surge, which makes your brain less sensitive, so you're less happy long term. And the key is to avoid those things, to live in a very calm, quiet life. Just do the things that are worthwhile, like work and family and so forth. And your brain becomes more sensitive, and that just raises your level of happiness.
I had an absolutely fascinating conversation with Jim Penman from the Jim's group, so much so that we've split it into 2 episodes. So if you want to catch up on the next part of the discussion, where we get into his research and his passion about epigenetics, which is absolutely fascinating, stay tuned, and you'll be listening to Mr. Jim Penman from the Jim's Group, Part 2. Bye for now.
You've been listening to The Tool Shed. If this podcast struck a chord with you, make sure you spread the word by sharing it with your mates in the building industry. We love your help to make the building industry better for everyone involved.